I'm sure these 13 in front of me will appreciate that I'm going to be pretty short today. But let me just tell you a little story. Once upon a time, there was a king who ruled very, very wisely, and the people of his kingdom just greatly adored him. And that king had four daughters. And the four daughters were very well liked by the people of that kingdom. And one day the king called the daughters together and said, I'm going to go to a monastery that's really, really far away, and I'm going to spend time there in prayer with God. And he said, I'm leaving the four of you in charge of the kingdom. And so before he left, what he did was he gave each one of them a gift, and the gift was one single grain of rice. Gave them that gift, and then he hugged them, and he left to go to this monastery. And the eldest daughter, she took that grain of rice. She thought this was extra special, so what she did was tied a golden thread around it. She put it in this crystal box, put it up on her dresser in her room, so while she was in her room, she could take a look at that and always be reminded of her father, the king. Second one also thought that gift was important, so what she did was took that grain of rice, put it in a wood box, put it under the bed in a nice safe place so it would be protected and preserved. The third one took that grain of rice, threw it over her shoulder and said, this is stupid. This is stupid. Why? What's a dumb gift? And the fourth one, though, the youngest child of all, took that rice to her room, and she looked at that grain of rice, looked at it, pondered it all that day, all that week, all that month after month after month, wondering, why in the world did my father give me this grain of rice? And after a year had almost gone by, the light bulb went off in her head, and she figured out why in the world he gave that gift. Meanwhile, several years go by, and these four girls kind of had ruled the kingdom. And one day, Dad returned. One day the king returned, and he's full of joy. You could see he's excited. You can see he's absolutely thrilled to see his daughters. And he said, hey, let me see the gifts I've given you, the gifts I gave you so long ago. And the oldest brought her crystal box, gold thing of rice. She showed it to him, presented it to him, and the king said to her, thank you, thank you. The second daughter went upstairs, crawled under her bed, pulled out that wood box from its safe confines, presented it to the father, and he said, thank you. The third child, remember that third child? Third child saw what was going on, so she went scrambling into the kitchen to try and find a piece of rice. And she found one, brought it to the father, and what do you think the father said? Thank you. Thank you. Then the youngest one came forward and she said, Dad, I thought about this for a long, long time, about why you gave us this thing of rice. And she said, then I realized it was a seed. I realized it was a seed, so I planted it in the ground, and it grew, and from that came other seeds, which I in turn planted again, and that cycle kept repeating over and over and over again. She took him over to the window, said, look, Dad, look out the window. When you look out there, we have an enormous crop of rice. Now it can feed an entire nation. The king took off his crown in that moment and placed it on her head and said, you have learned all that it means to rule and to be a servant. And from then on, she was the one who ruled the kingdom. The story, I think, reminds us what an incredible privilege and responsibility that we have as God's children, and privilege and responsibility come together, and they can't be separated. Each one of those daughters was privileged and was given tremendous gifts, but the first three didn't really get it. There are some people who put their faith they keep it in the safe confines of their room, in their house. They feel pretty good about it, but ultimately they never take it outside. There are some who are even afraid to bear witness to their faith with the people who are closest to them. That's sort of like the girl who put it under her bed. There are some who are privileged with that gift of faith, and they just kind of discard it or don't even think about it. The only one who makes the real difference, though, is that youngest child. That youngest child who invests themselves in the world, spreading God's goodness. And you realize when you try and do that day in and day out on the front line of the world, it bears tremendous fruit and brings joy to so many people. Today is the confirmation Sunday of these 13 people in front of us. And in a sense, all of us, we're always called to take steps of faith, but we're always called to be like that fourth child. That youngest child who appreciated what the Father, the King, had given to her. She didn't take it for granted, and she invested it into the world. Ultimately, as the kids kneel today, what they're saying is, I want to be that fourth child who makes a difference in this world, who's led by the Spirit, who pours out my life in service so that other people can experience the joy of knowing Jesus in this world. And as you do that, recognize you bring hope, you bring healing, and you inspire others to follow along. Amen.